Coaches, today before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, CoachPad. No matter if you draw scout cards by hand or use a program on your computer, the CoachPad will give you back time by never stuffing a binder again before heading out to practice. First 13.3-inch electronic device allowing coaches to clearly display scout cards outdoors in the sun has been a game changer for programs this past fall and those currently planned all across the country. This new technology allows coaches to coach and not the monotonous task of stuffing and dealing with binders on the practice field. Check out the CoachPad and CoachPad Mini on thecoachpad.com. Please make sure you check out our sponsors, our affiliates, and here is another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have Coach Greg Webster. He's the offensive coordinator at Springfield College. Coach, how are you doing?
Good. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I appreciate you coming on. Coach is a flexbone triple. I mean, whatever you want to call it. Some people don't like the term flexbone. Some people think triple narrows it down too much, or whatever it is. But how did you end up as the offensive coordinator at Springfield? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I think probably goes back to being a player there, right? So I was a player there from 2005 to 2009, and then I stayed on and was a graduate assistant there. Coach actually on the offensive side of the ball. So I was a outside linebacker, strong safety when I played there, and then GA'd on the offensive side of the ball. And then spent a year at Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology in Terre Haute, Indiana, a good Division III school, like excellent engineering school. And it's I had never heard of the school before. A former GA knew a guy, Brian White, who got hired as the offensive line coach and recruiting coordinator there when Jeff Sokol took over back around, it was 2011, I believe. And really a really good school out in the Midwest, engineering and high quality academic kids. Was there for a year and then went from there to the University of Maine, where we've always had a pretty good Springfield College connection up there. Joe Harris-Simiak, who is currently now the defense coordinator, Rutgers. We played in GA together, and he got promoted up there back in 2012. So, I was fortunate enough to come on with him and Coach Cosgrove, who was a head coach up there, longtime head coach up there, and spent 4 years up there as doing video, doing assistant D-backs, and finally, in the last couple of years, doing safeties and special teams. And then in 2016, the head coach at Springfield College, Mike DeLong, retired. Had been there for quite a while. He was my coach and the coach previous to that. I mean, he was, him and Coach Manello in 1986 were the original guys who put in back then the wishbone offense. So they were the founders of it at Springfield College. And so he retired after being there for quite a while. And then Mike Sarasolo, who was the offensive coordinator since 2001, took over as the head coach. And, I GA'd for Coach C. And then, going back, he recruited me out of high school. So always had a pretty tight relationship there. And, going back to as a high school student, player, and then GA, and then, a guy who's provided me and a lot of other GAs with a ton of mentoring and great advice throughout the years once we've left there. So had the opportunity to come back and coach at a place that had a profound impact on me for a guy and a man who, had a bit of impact on my growth and development as a coach and, more importantly, as a person. So jumped at that opportunity to come back there. So that was 2016. And, this will be 7 years there now as the offensive coordinator.
Now, there's a couple ways I want to take this, but first, how do you think, you spent a long time coaching defense before you came back as the OC. How has that helped you? Now, obviously, like coaching DBs versus triples, a whole different conversation anyways. But you still, as a defensive coach, like you're learning coverages, you're learning fronts, rotations. How has all that stuff benefited you as the offensive coordinator at Springfield College?
Well, I think the first thing is the teaching aspect, right? The teaching aspect and the mindset of, a defensive player and a defensive coach. because, I think as offensive coaches, sometimes we get caught into maybe scheming too much, right? And I've been a fault of that before, right? And then not to take anything away from the defense, but the defense has to practice, their base installation and then get prepared for the triple. So sometimes it's what can a defensive player handle that we're putting in, right? So that it's more of looking at us as an execution standpoint on focusing more of that than sometimes trying to outthink people, if that makes sense, right? Because I look at, when I was coaching the safeties, we're a quarters coverage team. And if it was to a pro surface, tight end flanker to the field, like the safety's responsibilities was get his eyes to the tight end, right? And he had his reads based off with a tight end down block, out block, pass release, whatever. And then his eyes would be staring in the backfield, right? And the tight end would be 10 yards behind him. So it's like, as much as offensive coordinators, we think, hey, defensive guys should be here. Well, defensive coaches are trying to get the defender's eyes in the right spots, right? So if we spend so much time trying to out scheme ourselves, then our kids won't execute up to the level that they need to in order to successfully carry out a game plan.
Okay. Now, the other question we'll ask, and I try to ask this to every Flexbone or triple or option guy that I talk to, is why that offense? Like, obviously you guys have ran it for a long time, so it's a little bit different, and your head coach ran it, but philosophically, why has that been so? And because you guys have been pretty successful with it as well, like why is that your focal point? I mean, there's 8 billion ways to run option anyways, but why the option? Why the triple? Why do what you do?
I think first the mindset in the kids is the first thing. We're a pretty, just as a football program, special teams, offense and defense, we're a pretty aggressive style type of play. So it's the mindset that we want to instill in our players is that, hey, we're going to set the pace, we're going to set the tempo, we're going to call the play, right? So I think it first starts with that mindset. And then from there, right, it's really building in those core values within our program of, commitment, tradition, brotherhood, right? And knowing that the triple option, you need all 11 to succeed, right? You need all 11 to execute and be selfless players. And we build our culture around the brotherhood mentality. So I think that is a key to any triple option attack, that selfless mentality of, we've had games where 2 games in a row, the quarterback carried the ball 30 times. So he had 60 touches in 2 games. And then the next game he had 10 touches, right? Yeah. Based off of what we felt we could take advantage of or what the defense was giving us, right? So it's that, I think, first and foremost, it's the mindset and the culture within our players and our team is the most important thing within our program. And again, developing that. Not only offensively, defensively, but special teams throughout the entire program. And then I think also when you talk about schematically, it feels like a lot of the offenses out there are very similar, right? Yes. You have the spread, no huddle type, shotgun. You don't see a lot of 2-back power I teams anymore. So I feel like that, teams now have to adjust pretty dramatically to defend our type of offense. Well, we do run. I mean, there's probably teams who throw the ball more in 2 games than we do in the entire season, right? So I think it's that the preparation. The old saying is we're going to do it all the time, and then it takes a defense. They have to prepare for it 1 week.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed, because like we talked a little bit before we came on, that I've been watching some. I try to do a decent amount of prep for these.
Right.
Like it's not just throwing random questions as some people might. Yeah. But so like I've watched some of your games. Like I told you I know one of the things I noticed, like there's a lot of things I noticed, but I think the main thing, one of the big things I took away, because I was rewatching stuff last night, is you do a lot of like check with me. At least that's what it looks like to me. I don't know if that's illusion or whatever it is, but you seem to have I'm not going to say that's a spread concept that was originated there, but it's probably more when you think of check with me stuff, you think of more no huddle spread teams than a wing T team or a Flexbone team.
Right.
What is the philosophical idea behind that? Why do you do it? And really, how's that benefited you guys? Because it seems like it puts you in a lot of good advantageous spots.
Yeah, so I think probably it started off with, we've traditionally, back when I GA'd and Coach C has been the offense coordinator, right, for quite a while. I mean, he's always had a good relationship with the coaches down at Navy. And Coach Ken is great and open his doors to us when we've gone down there. I mean, I went down there as a GA, and then when we came back, we went down there. And when we went down there, we've always had Springfield coaches to lean on. Mike Judge, who was a former quarterback at Springfield, was a fullbacks coach there, and then a couple of years ago moved on to Miami Dolphins. Now Jason McDonald's, who was at the Naval Prep School for a while, then has been in the fullbacks coach there for the last couple of years. So we've had that relationship. We went down there after my first year there in 16, and they were doing some no huddle stuff, and that's kind of where we started to go down that route with the no huddle check with me stuff. And I think it's more recently, since 2017, where we went to the signal, the code word, the new no huddle system, which has been, I think, great for us, especially. It makes it easier, I think, sometimes adjusting on the fly and play calling wise, because you can prepare all week. Say you want to be a 2-minute offense, right? And you have a wristband put together, and then the defense comes out in a completely different look than what you had thought or what you would prepare for. Then you throw that wristband out the window, right? So I think starting with that no huddle, and then the check with me, if teams are stemming or moving or trying to run linebackers through, or if we just want to control the clock, another way, because we're moving pretty quickly, but then we're looking at like, okay, if we want to, control the clock a little bit, I think the check with me stuff definitely helps.
Now that kind of hit on something I was going to ask later, but you mentioned Navy there. Like, obviously, from what you just said, Navy's a big resource for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's not a crap ton of teams that run Flexbone. I mean, it's more prevalent in high school than it is anywhere else.
Right.
And really, if you look at the college landscape, because I have recently, I mean, you got really 3 teams at big level, and then you got some sprinkled down as you kind of go down through lower D1, D2, D3. I think it's probably most prevalent in Division III football. So besides Navy, like, and obviously you have a lot of good resources. We talked about this before I came on. Like, you got 3 things on Glacier, you got a couple things in a couple other places. You use something for a station. Where do you go besides Navy to research and pull stuff from or get ideas from?
Well, I think the first place I'll go is back in old game plans, right? With Coach Ursula and stuff he put together, that maybe they ran 15 years ago that would fit now. Yes. So first, I think it's the self-scout and looking at, what we've done over, 15, 20 years that is still relevant today, to try to mix it up a little bit. I think definitely, building relationships with high school coaches too, because they're facing the same things that you are. And I think, that it goes 2 ways. Like, I'll meet with high school coaches and they'll come up to ask stuff about us, but then it's like, I ask them questions too, on what they're doing, how they handle things, especially too, where, the NCAA is pretty much getting away from cup blocking on the perimeter, coming up, and they are getting away from it, right? So
Yeah.
Talking with high school coaches who can't cup block on the perimeter, and how they handle that. And then another resource has always been Lucani, who's the offense coordinator down at Citadel, who was a former player in GA here. He's been a great resource for myself, Coach C, and just the entire program as well.
Okay. Now, continuing on from that is, like, each year to each year, how do you decide on what to major on? Because I've watched, even just watching Navy. Like, some years they're really triple heavy, midline heavy. Other years they're more into the belly series,
right?
Because of obviously a lot of it's personnel. But how quickly do you look at that? How quickly do you alter? Okay, this is the order we're going to install next year because I know this is what we're going to have. What does that decision-making process look like for you on, like, okay, this year midline is going to be a bigger focal point for us than say outside veer?
I think first when we look at installation, like how we install doesn't change very much. We'll make small tweaks to it because it still goes back to the teaching, right? I mean, you look at the last 2 years, I mean, our it's been outside veer, zone dive, inside veer, as far as the percentage breakdown of play family. But we're still going to install inside veer day one because that's the teaching, right? And how you teach a math, how you teach communication, it all ties back into that, right? And so I think then we look at, okay, what defensive fronts have we been getting? So adjust based off of the defensive fronts we've been getting and what we think we're going to get in the future and what plays will be best towards those fronts. And then I think it kind of develops sometimes as the season progresses when you're looking at like in season self-scout on, okay, what plays are effective? Are we getting a trend where, every defense has shown what we thought they were going to give, or are we getting a trend where, all right, we've gotten 3 weeks in a row where we thought we were getting one defense and they came out completely different defense, right? So I think it's a very some people like to use this word, right? Organic, what have you not? It's a developmental thing. I think sometimes when you get in the season with us, for sure.
Okay. Now you mentioned outside veer there. Like I was talking to a South Carolina high school coach who used to be a triple guy, a flexbone guy, as an O-line coach, and his current head coach, they're more shotgun counter stuff now. But he talked about how he loved outside veer and how it was his favorite, and it was probably the most run thing they ran. Why do you think it's so frequent in your play calling? Why is it so prevalent compared to say an inside veer or midline?
Well, I think anytime you put a tight end in, right, you make teams have to adjust to the tight end. I think that you get unbalanced formations, tight end unbalanced formations, then teams have to declare, they have to shift, they have to do something to adjust to the tight end side, especially if we do like a tight end and receiver over, right? But I also think it's not outside veer, but it's how outside veer complements the other plays, how outside veer, inside veer, and midline all complement each other to keep a 5 technique, an overhang defender on their toes.
Okay, no, perfect, coach. Like I said, because he made the comment to me the other night, like you can't defend outside veer and sweep at the same time. Like you got to pick one. That's kind of what you're saying as well, is they all complement each other, and so forth. Now, here's where I get, like, I can look up outside veer and inside veer rules. That's the easy part. But
right.
My biggest question is how people practice it. I think, and I watched something on YouTube. I think that was part of a longer clinic you did on practice the other night as well. But how much does practice change year to year for you? And then what is your ideal structures you kind of go down?
So I think in the practice organization, we look at, first as a team, right? So myself, Coach C, and our defense coordinator, Lou DiRenzo, we'll get together. What are our practice blocks going to be, right? And we've put them in, within the last couple of years. We make small changes here and there based off of what we feel like we need to do better, and also input from the kids too. On how practice structure, how they feel it's going. So I think first of all, it's not so much offensively, but it's okay, how are we going to structure this practice as a program, and not look at it as one day, but look at it as a week, a season, and a year, first off and foremost, right? And then getting input, ourselves as the coordinators and head coach, the assistant coaches and graduate assistants, and then the players, right? So you're getting all this different information and feedback, and then looking at how it applies to when we go into the season. So when we structure practice, we'll look at, we'll be out there for about 7.5 minutes for a special teams walkthrough, and 7.5 minutes. This is when we get into into actual season, right? So classes, whatnot, guys are moving and shaking all day. And so 7.5 minutes special teams, 7.5 minutes of offense and defense, right? Then we'll do run stretch, and we'll do our specialist kick returners, punt returners, any of that stuff during run stretch to save some time during practice. So that'll be about a 10-minute block. And then we'll go into an RTP period, which is ready to play. So the kids amp it up right away, right? Whether, offensively, we could do a simple team tempo, like, hey, let's get these plays going fast on air for 5 minutes, and then we're into a ball security circuit, right? So that's the first pretty much 20 minutes of practice. As the season progresses, hey, that RTP period will be about 5 minutes, right? And so then maybe in that 5 minutes, we do ball security, and then we do an amp it up period offensively at another point, right? And then after that, we'll go into special teams, which at the beginning of the year will be a 10-minute. As we progress, it'll be more rep based. So you're looking at 7 to 8 minutes. And after that, we'll come out individual. And individual will meshes with the quarterbacks and fullbacks. We'll work all 3 pass. We'll progress to a pitches period, right? So we're always working that, and then it really depends on what the offensive game plan is that week. What we need to rep. Do we need to do what we call 3-man drills? So center, guard, fullback, quarterback, and work trap, work zone dive. Do we need to do a little half, get into some pod work a little bit, right? So I think that is how we look at that. And then middle practice, we'll have a crossover period with our defense, right? And we don't get it because in preseason, we'll line up, we'll go 11 on 11, here we go, right? Like everything's live, quarterback's live, we got to get those live reps. And when we get into the season, obviously, the defense isn't seeing triple option every week. It's 1 week when we play Kings Point, so that'll be a little bit different practice structure. But one-on-ones, pass pro with the offense and defensive line, maybe a skelly period, something so the kids still feel that competitive nature within practice. And we got to throw and catch balls too. They got to defend them, and our offensive line has to defend, pass protect, and defensive line's got to work that live situation. So doing that, another special teams period built in the middle as well. Again, a 7 to 10 minute period, and then we'll end practice with team. With team, again, we'll kind of build. Like maybe we do some half line, maybe we do some team option. Maybe today's more of a situational day. We do a 3rd down period. And, when we do situational football with the kids, with triple option, the game plan isn't changing much, right? It's more of the mentality of the kids. So they understand the importance of, converting on 3rd down, converting on 4th down, how important it is to get away with points when you're in the red zone, green zone.
Yeah. Okay. Like you mentioned there about mesh, and because one of the things I noticed while watching your film is y'all's timing is pretty dang good. Like just from handoff, from the Veer portion as well. How detailed do you get it during your mesh period? Because be nice and frank about it. Some coaches kind of go through the motions. Others are super detailed in every step. And I think that would be my assumption, especially with this kind of offense, is how detailed you have to be with the step work and footwork. And how detailed do you get with that? And how critical are you during that mesh, quarterback, fullback mesh, quarterback, pitch mesh time?
Yeah, I think first it's giving some sort of feedback every rep, right? Whether it's positive, negative, or whether it's, there's the feedback sandwich, a negative comment built in between 2 positives, right? So giving some sort of feedback. So one, the kids understand the importance of doing it, because, we're doing 10 minutes, we're working inside Veer, outside Veer, and midline, you're looking at week 8, because okay, here we go, right? Right. So making sure there is always feedback with that. As far as the detail, right? You try to be as detail-oriented possible without slowing the kids down. Because I think, and I always try to, I'm doing like these installs. So I do these installs with high schools the last couple of weeks, right? Started last week and got my last one tonight. And, sometimes I catch myself overcoaching, right? So you want to be detailed and you want to coach every single point, but then it slows the kid down and he's not thinking. Right. So sometimes it'll be, we're talking about, hey, get your your play side foot to 5 and 7 o'clock, get your hands back, pin the front, chin, reach, ride, right? And then it's just like, hey man, just get the ball to the mesh point, right? So I think, it depends on, like, the kids give you that, whoa, there's too much going on here. Like, it's, hey, how fast can you get the ball from the center's ass back to the stomach of the fullback and get it to the mesh point?
Yeah, no, perfect, coach. Now, the other thing I want to ask you, like, obviously in your offense, especially, you do a lot of pod work, as you kind of mentioned. Like, it might be half a line, it might be kind of a mesh pod where it's really your fullbacks, your wings, and your quarterback. I assume there's a lot more with that. Like, for a high school coach working the option, is there one that you think kind of stands out of the others that kind of is the most beneficial, especially if a high school coach is short on time?
Yeah, I think the half line period is huge. I think that because then you can just lock in and run those plays, and especially too, we were in spring ball, we're doing more of the pod work and half line work than the full team stuff, because the emphasis in spring ball is technique, execution, and communication, right? So for us, we're locking more into that than we did the full team stuff. But then when we get in the season, we have to do the team stuff. So the quarterback sees the whole picture and the kids when I talk about communication, I'm talking about the communication, the offensive line speaking together, the quarterback, fullback, but then you still, with the no huddle, you have that other layer of communication where they get to see the signals, communicate the signals, and execute at a high level with that. So when we get in the season, we'll do more of that team stuff. But I think for, depending on how the mechanism of the offense that a high school coach is calling the plays, for kids to just lock in, right, see the look and see the reps. I think that's important to just, hey, you're looking at this half of the line. Sometimes we'll do half line and we won't even put the backside pitch back in there, right? Hey, we're working outside Veer, and we're working to a 3-man surface. We'll just take center, guard, tackle, tight end, front side A-back, fullback, quarterback, and just work, the die phase and the keep phase.
Now, you mentioned, and it kind of sparked something in the check with me that I probably should have asked you earlier, and I'll just hit back on it real quick, is when do you start that process? Like, is that along with day one, or when
No, I think it's, we'll install in preseason, then it'll be by game plan. I think depending on what we feel like will help. Sometimes we don't want to use the check with me stuff, right? Sometimes it's here or there. So probably the game you're probably watching was our playoff game, the Cortland game, I think, where we use it a lot. And that was a big part of the game plan going into that game. But probably if you watch the games the previous 2 weeks, we didn't use it at all. So I think it really depends on, what we feel like the defense is going to give us and how we want to, formulate the game plan.
Okay. Now, the other thing I'm going to ask you, because I asked you about just like one pod drill for high school coaches, because you probably you talk to a lot of high school coaches who run the Flexbone. You probably see a lot of stuff as you kind of go. What do you think are the biggest things that are maybe missed or need worked on for high school coaches trying to install the option and the Flexbone and the variations of it?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the ball security, right? And and as college coaches, sometimes you forget about that too, right? That you want to focus so much on scheme and all right, we got to do this, we got to do that. Hey, let's get this play in. And then all of a sudden you turn the ball over 3 times in a game and you lost. It's like,
yeah,
well, like that. So I think the fundamental, and we saw that at the beginning of the year, this past year, right? We start off 1-3. I mean, we put the ball on the ground way too much. And, so we went to bye week and really, adjusted how we practiced and the emphasis we put on ball security, right? And we changed some things on the way we're coaching it too. So I think that goes back to your last question a little bit too of when you're talking about practice structure, is that kind of always be evaluating how your practices are going, right?
Yeah.
And if you're losing, like, okay, why is that? If you're losing and you're not executing, why is that happening? And I'm also not one to make wholesale changes either, and panic and like, oh my God, it's not working, right? But I think little tweaks here or there to practice structure can help. right? So back to but I think ball security is number one, right? And it's the lifeblood of our program, is taking care of the football, right? And then I think too, it's the execution, right? It's okay, we're going to run this play. And if you turn on a tape, sometimes you're like, man, if the right tackle did this, if he did that, and then it's like, okay, why did he not do that? Right. And that goes back to our practice organization. How many times do we rep that during practice? Right. And we did one year, we actually did with the GAs go back and do a little study of the percentage of plays that we repped during the week compared to the percentage of plays that we repped on Saturday. Right. So they went back and they looked at, like, tallied up all the things and looked at, right, if we put in a new play, how much time did we spend repping it during the week versus how much time did we actually, the percentage of time we actually ran it during the game, right? And what we found was it was our base plays were what we ran during the game. We put in a new wrinkle, and, was it worth the time that we put in, right? So I think always evaluating your practice time, and if you are trying to put in a wrinkle, how successful will that wrinkle be based off the time that you can spend doing it during the week of practice? And then on the same side, okay, if you're spending time doing that wrinkle, what is that taking away from your base plays where you need to make sure that you execute at a high level in order to be successful?
Yeah. It's a business. That's just a cost matrix and
Right.
and your return on investment and then what you're giving up at the same time. So yeah, no, that makes 100% sense, Coach. And then one of my other questions was, I mean, obviously play action passing is deadly in your offense, as with any heavy running offense. I watched, me and a buddy of mine watched the Army Navy game the other week, and same thing. Like, I mean, you just see them just running to death, and then they'll run a play action, and the post, as always, the post is wide open in the middle of the field.
Yeah, right.
You just pray the quarterback doesn't underthrow it.
Yeah, right.
Which he usually somehow does at least once a game.
Right.
From a play action standpoint, obviously it works because you're so run heavy and they're focused on stop. They have their option roles and so forth. But from a play action standpoint, what do you look for when you're looking at COD? And then how often do you change or evolve your play action concepts over the years?
I think, first it starts with your off-season self-scout analysis of, what are teams doing to you? Because it kind of goes in phases, I guess, if you look at what teams do to you, right? When I first got here, we were getting a lot of 1-high 4-4 teams, right? Getting a lot of those 8-man front looks. And then we had a couple games where the halfbacks had big games. We got a body on the free safety, and we don't see that as much anymore, right? So first it looks at, okay, when we adjust our play action pass game, it's based off of our self-scout analysis in the winter months of what have we gotten previous years, right? The previous year. And then, it kind of builds to when we do spring visits and meeting with other coaches. Hey, what are they doing a little bit differently pass game wise? And then it goes back to that cost benefit analysis that we were just talking about. Okay. There's a lot of pass plays that you can run, and there's, can the quarterback make that read? How much time do you have practice them? And then look at 2 of the technique of teaching the routes, right? So can we get it so we're teaching these routes and how do they apply to concepts, right? So then if you're changing a concept week to week, the receiver doesn't have to learn a new route technique.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, kind of going in with that, and you mentioned quarterbacks there, is how much, actually, let me rephrase this. How do you evaluate, especially when you have like a quarterback battle, the differences in that kind of offense? I think I won't say it's not, in a spread offense, probably it's a little easier. I mean, especially with a heavy throwing team. But when you're talking about detailed reads, getting them in the right, if you need to check with me and move, and how do you evaluate your quarterbacks in this system?
I think the first thing we talk about detail reads, which are important. But how does a kid react when he misses a read, right? Because he's going to miss reads. So what is his reaction? Does he miss a read and still get a positive gain by following the fullback up in there, or does he miss a read and try to make too much happen, right? And then looking at how does he react when things go negatively, right? So you look in preseason, putting him in pressure situations, maybe putting him in sometimes situations that are not advantageous to them, and then seeing how they bounce back when they fail, right? I think those are the first things you're going to look at is, what they're made of, because in this offense, it can go pretty quickly where a quarterback can put the ball on the ground, but he's got to bounce back that next rep, right? And you've seen it both happen where quarterback puts the ball on the ground, turns the ball over, and then that kind of spirals and the rest of the game goes that way. Or you have a quarterback respond and not let a previous mistake affect future mistakes, right? So I think you're looking at one, how does he respond? What is he made of? How does he take care of the football, right? Is he a cowboy out there and try to do way too many different things? Or is he playing within the offense and, doing the thing that is the most important thing with our offense is taking care of the football. And so I think you look at that as far as, looking at plays and evaluating based off of that. I think you as a coordinator want to fit the offense to the strengths of the quarterback, right? So if you have a talented quarterback who you say, oh, he's just not getting it, and then there's another kid who can execute, but maybe doesn't have that game-breaking ability, that's when you have to make the decision of what do we want to look for? Do we want to evolve the offense a little bit to fit around the playmaker's abilities? Or do we feel like we have enough tools around the quarterback who can execute the reads and the pitches that we can win with him?
That's great, Coach. Because I said, I think it's just a different way of attacking it, just because of what you ask your quarterbacks to do in terms of reads, running the ball, pitching the ball. It's just from my perspective. I've only done 1 year in a true option oriented offense. And that was many a year ago. Kind of, how do you, and then kind of one of my last questions is, you talked about a little bit, is you're going to get stuff that you don't expect. And especially high school is even more deal with just junk fronts, is what I just call them. They're just trash.
Right.
I call them trash defenses because it's just unsound, dumb crap that it's like the flavor of the week. How do you deal with that trash or that unexpectedness from a given week to week? Colleges are a little bit more sound in what they do, but or even just advice for schools that deal with that. I understand it's a rule-based offense, but again, you're going to get just dumb stuff that's going to freak out your kids or surprise your kids. How do you approach that?
Well, one, I think it goes back to what your day one install is like when we saw inside Veer, right? And the mindset within our kids when we teach it, it's, as coaches, we'll talk about it, that it's a defense. As kids, it's a front and a perimeter, right? So apply your rules and go. So I think that is the first mentality of it, right? So that our kids always, we're always hammering that into our kids so that if we do get something that we're not expecting, hey, it is a front and a perimeter, right? Apply your rules and go. Because we'll get that, there'll be some games where, maybe we want to put in a new formation or we don't have, this formation on tape from these guys in previous, but hey, we want to run it. Okay, well, we're going to throw it out there and rely on our kids to communicate and understand it's a front and it's a perimeter, right? So I think that's first and foremost. And then, talking especially the quarterback about grass, right? When you're talking about the kind of flavor of the week and, there's a quote, unsound defense or whatnot, it's not overcomplicating for the quarterback and saying, hey man, right, where's the green grass, right? If there's a lot of guys on the outside, then it's probably good to run inside, right? If they get a lot of guys inside, then it's probably good to run outside, right? So talking in basic, simple concepts, so that when you do, because sometimes you'll get out there and you're like, what the heck is that defense, right? But it's like, okay, don't worry about the whole picture. Worry about the side we're running it to. Worry about the number of guys, because if you look at the side we're running to, the number of guys inside, right, then you can fill in the gaps with the rest of the picture.
Okay. You mentioned kind of identifying and simplifying theirs. So with that, how much walking through and identification time do you do compared to full speed?
Oh, definitely. I probably actually forgot to mention, we do have a 10-minute walkthrough in the body of practice all the time, right? So we have that walkthrough at the beginning, and that walkthrough in the middle. And when we do that, we try to, give the kids the answers to the test, essentially, right? When we're giving them, walk it through, and then rep it, right? So it builds confidence. Yeah, we'll mix it, like we'll throw something to try to trick them in every week, obviously, to make sure they're still thinking, right? But walking through so they build the confidence in that communication and that execution. And then obviously in preseason, we do that quite a bit.
How much does obviously in preseason, it's more with your install and it's what you're working on that day, but in season, how much does that walk through on what you're repping? Obviously the defense is getting adjusted based off of your seeing, but offensively, how much is getting adjusted or changed, or how different are the calls from week to week?
As far as like the defensive looks or our play calls, or what do you mean by that?
Your offensive calls, how much do those change week to week for that walkthrough period?
Oh, they won't. I mean, it's our offense is based off of, our rules and our communication, whether it's a 2-eye or 2 technique or a 2 or 3-man perimeter, and apply your count and go. So it really doesn't change.
And then and you mentioned their offensive line wise, how much do you guys focus on communication on the O-line point, and how do you approach teaching them that part?
Well, I think for us, it's AMC, always make a call, right? So that, whether it's a 5 or an overhang or guard uncovered up the second level, guard uncovered all the way through. And that's important. I mean, if you're running counter option and you're running against a 50 front, hey, is it a 4 or 4-eye, right? So they're communicating that front side tackle and guard are communicating that back to the backside guard to know if he's got a log or if he's got to wrap up and through. So there's quite a bit of communication that goes on. And obviously, if it's a young group, there's some learning curves with that, right? But that's coaching football, right? So I think, because some people say, well, there's a lot of communication. But there's a lot of communication in coaching football in general, right? So when you have a young group, you're going to have to coach them, and you're going to have to, adjust what you're installing from a play standpoint to fit what they can handle and execute. If you get an older group, then, throw it at them and see how they handle it.
Now, last question I'm going to ask you, like my personal favorite option play is midline triple. I love it. I just love how fast it hits. It's violent. It's beautiful. I think it's
great play. It's a great play.
Yes, I personally think it's really simple. But what do you like? Obviously, there's plays you have success with, but what is your personal favorite play and why? Like, it might not be something you call all the time, but what do you like generally when you install it? You enjoy it, you love it. It's like, to you, one of the, like, it's your favorite option play.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an easy answer, outside Veer, right? Because I think it's the physicality of play, of getting a double team at the point of attack. It is awesome. Like, just to, you look at the offensive line and it's a pretty simple communication, right? It's double team start from the outside in, and then it's triple scheme on the backside, right? And it's put your hand in the ground and get off the football. And for the quarterback, right, it's given less. The dive key's heading in front. And it's a simplistic play to run to a 3-2 4-man surface, and get down, put your hand on the ground, and here we go.
Perfect, Coach. Well, coaches, give Coach a follow. His Twitter will be in the bio. Like, share, subscribe as always. Check out our sponsor, CoachPad, in the bio. And then that was another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.